we can start as people are coming in the webinar. So my name is Julen Imaña, and I would like to welcome you to this webinar as part of the onHeat training program. This is the second webinar of this training series, and the topic for today is optimizing the design of district heating and cooling networks, particularly using online tools. If you are interested in watching our previous webinars, you can do so in our website. And
Julen, you're on mute all of a sudden.
sorry, you can hear me now? Yeah.
Yes.
So I just wanted to let everyone know that this meeting will be recorded. So if you wouldn't like to your face to show in the recording, just turn the cameras off. So now, Lucy, you can start the recording.
Yeah, we're recording now.
Yeah. And so we move on to the agenda. For everyone to know, we will have, first of all, Martin Hawley and Lewis McNamee from the Center for Sustainable Energy that will present us the THERMOS tool. This is a tool that will help us design district heating and cooling networks. And then we have two case study cities invited, particularly Bludenz in Austria and Galway in Ireland, with Richard Buchele and Luis Miguel Blanes presenting their cases of how they use digital tools to design district heating and cooling networks or analyze them. And finally, we will have a question and answer section at the end. So if you have any questions during the session, please feel free to drop them in the chat and we will check them out. So just a brief introduction to the topic today. What you can see here is a diagram developed as part of the onHeat project. This is a workflow we designed for adopting and implementing a heating and cooling strategy in our city. And as you can see, today we are in the bottom part of this diagram, already in the project feasibility. And the design and feasibility study of a district heating or cooling project can be highly benefited when using digital tools, as softwares like THERMOS or hot maps and other online softwares out there can save us a lot of time and money and still provide accurate insights for the deployment of thermal networks. And this can be much better explained by our first speakers, Martin Hawley and Lewis McNamee, as they work for the Center for Sustainable Energy, or CSE. CSE is a partner in the onHeat project, and they are actually the developers of the software THERMOS. So I'm gonna directly give the floor to Martin Hawley first, I think.
Thanks, Julian, and hi, good morning, everyone. So yeah, I'm just going to speak for a couple of minutes about THERMOS to give you a little bit of background on the tool and how it became a software tool as such. So it was developed through a Horizon 2020 project that was it was a 3-year project that got extended to 4.5 years. It finished in 2021. THERMOS actually stands for Thermal Energy Resource Modeling and Optimization System. It was a fairly big project. We worked with 15 partners across Europe, and CSE coordinated that. And as Julian said, it's CSE were the main developers of the actual tool. The need for it was really identified as that there was something needed to accelerate the planning of heating and cooling networks by to try and make it easier, cheaper, and faster to undertake pre-feasibility studies. So that's what we developed THERMOS to try and do. So it is aimed at the level of pre-feasibility, although in some respects it goes beyond that. But yes, we won't go into too much detail on that today. It was developed primarily for use by local authority energy planners. And we did work with 7 local authorities during its development, during the THERMOS project, but a lot of the users we find today tend to be consultants that work on behalf of local authorities. So yeah, it was published. It's an open source web-based application, and there is a restricted version available to everyone online. There's an unrestricted version available through a subscription service that CSE offers. Functionality between those 2 versions is largely the same. The only restriction being that there's limitations on the amount of data that you can upload and the number of optimizations you can do over a certain period. But I should say onHeat participants automatically get access to the unrestricted version, of course. There's 3 essential parts to THERMOS. There's a heat mapping element which estimates heat demands of buildings. There's a network optimization model, so create scenarios for heat networks, and then it will try to optimize those against certain conditions and objectives. And there's a supply optimization feature to the tool as well. So those are the 3 main things that it does. So as will be demonstrated by Lewis, the main advantage really of THERMOS, we think, is the speed at which you can get up and running and actually produce results. But of course, the quality of outputs depends on the quality of inputs. So it is worth dedicating a bit of time to identify and collate local data as much as you can. THERMOS will try and estimate heat demands of buildings, for example, but that accuracy will vary depending on the input data. So by default, it will use OpenStreetMap data for building polygons and roads and routes. But that can be patchy depending on location. So it's better to try and supplement that with local data. And also, if you've got height data of buildings, then you can get better estimations of heat demand, because it looks at the volume of the building really to look at heat loss. And even better is if you've got actual energy use data for the buildings that you're looking at, the locality of, the THERMOS tends to zoom in on a locality, and you can look at network development within that locality. Size and scale, it will go up to quite a large area, depending on something like 5,000 buildings. Although the bigger the problem is, the longer it will take to solve, and the more complex it is. So there is a limit there in terms of the size of the problem you're looking at. You will also need to try and put in local data around costs, pipe costs, capital costs of plant, that kind of thing. But there is a sort of set of defaults within THERMOS, so you can practice using it and you can get results if you really want to see how it works, and then you can start looking at improving on the data inputs. So I'm not going to go on too much longer now. I think I'll stop there, because it's so much better to see it in action. And I'll let Lewis do the demo, and be really interesting to hear from the onHeat presenters who've actually used it after as well, a bit later on in this session. So over to you, Lewis.
Thanks, Martin. I'm just going to share my screen, so hopefully everyone's going to be able to see this. Do shout at me if you're not able to. So just briefly, I'm going to show you, this is the THERMOS website homepage. So this is where you can go to get access to that publicly available version of the tool Martin was talking about. And because this is quite a short session, I can't cover everything today. So you can go to this tool support training materials page, and there's a lot more here, such as exercises you can follow and training videos to help you really get a grip on THERMOS. I'm just going to now switch tab So as Martin mentioned, there's kind of three components to THERMOS. There's the almost data upload, heat demand mapping side, there's the network optimizer, and there's the supply optimizer. Again, due to just time constraints, I'm going to focus on the network optimizer today, which is generally, we think, the most interesting part of it. One of the main reasons for that is none of you want to sit here for 5 minutes watching a file upload on my computer. So we'll get straight into kind of the meat of it. For information, this area that we're looking at, this is part of the centre of Bristol, a city in the UK, which is where CSE is based. And the data I've got loaded into here comes from a mixture of Ordnance Survey, which is the UK agency who produces a lot of the maps used in the UK, and OpenStreetMaps for the roads. We could, in reality, I could have uploaded Ordnance Survey data for the roads. I could have used fully OpenStreetMap data. I could have combined that with LiDAR. There's kind of a lot of options to use different data depending on what you have available. And as Martin said, the more kind of local data you can get, the better. You could even go to the extent of getting the actual heat demand measured from meters for all of these buildings, if that's what you wanted to do. I've also set up quite a lot of the background stuff already, so I'm not going to go through that in too much detail today. So that's things like, for example, each building has a tariff that it will pay if it's connected to the heat network. I've just set up a single tariff based on the kind of GB average gas prices. So generally in our kind of dealings with UK local authorities, what we're aiming to do is create scenarios or create heat networks that would be available at cheaper or the same rate as gas to the consumers. It's a very important part of UK policy. So that's why I've done that. You can go to the level of detail of you can set up an individual tariff for every single building, or you can set it on building types. So like commercial buildings might pay a different tariff to individual residential buildings, for example. So to get into the actual tool, so what you're seeing here is a representation of kind of the buildings and roads and paths available in the area. You can go to a far larger area than this. Currently, I've got loaded about 300 buildings. That's mostly just because that keeps everything running quickly, even when I'm streaming it to you, because again, we don't want to deal with internet lag today. You can kind of customize a bit the way you're seeing it. So at the moment, I have a satellite back map on. But if I was just interested in the buildings, I can switch that off and then you can just see the buildings and roads. You also have some overlays, so you can switch on a heat map showing where the most or the highest building demands are, and you can switch on road labels. You can even kind of turn off everything. I'm not entirely sure why you'd want to do that, but it does help. So for example, you could see just the heat map. I'm going to zoom in on this area where you'll see some blue buildings and roads. Essentially, this is an area I've pre-prepped for today's session. But what you can do is you can select individual buildings and pathways. And what you can do is select what we call the constraint. And this is basically how THERMOS is going to consider these buildings. So there's three constraint types. There's forbidden, which everything is by default. And this means THERMOS isn't going to look at those buildings or roads at all. There's optional, and this is part of the optimizer. So when you run a scenario, THERMOS will look at the different things that are optional and will say either, yes, this goes on the network, or no, this doesn't go on the network, based on the objective you set. There's two objectives you can set. You can set either maximizing the whole system net present value, which means that it looks at alternative heating systems. So for example, gas boilers or individual air source heat pumps. Or you can look at maximizing the network net PV, which is essentially a proxy for how much money the network operator is going to make. There's obviously some nuance and complexity in there that I'm glossing over. And all of these are settable parameters. So you can set like the time period that net present value is considered over. You can set various costs. You can set various objectives. The other constraint is required. And what this says to THERMOS is this building absolutely must be on the network, regardless of if it's cost effective to add it or not. So you might use that, for example, if you're looking for a particular client who demands that their building's connected, or you may have, for example, existing network buildings and you're looking at modernizing that network. So the buildings that are already on the network must remain on the network. As you can see, I've selected a few buildings and made them all optional, and I selected a few paths which made them all optional. Essentially, this is very nearly ready to run. So what THERMOS would do when I run it would be to evaluate each of these buildings and roads, select what it believes to be the optimal path and the optimal kind of number of buildings for the best return on the objective. I'm in this scenario going to be using an objective of setting the best net present value to the network operator. The only thing I've got left to do on this is I need to set up a heat supply point. And just to make it easier, I'm just going to switch off all the unconstrained candidates. So this gets rid of all the buildings and roads that I haven't put in for THERMOS to consider. So the only thing left to do is set up a supply. And essentially, there's two ways you can do this. You can either draw a new building, which essentially puts in a single point source that you can set up as a supply, or you can take an existing building, right-click, and you can make it a supply point. The kind of fundamental logic behind that is this idea that generally you have a building that might have, for example, a CHP plant in the basement. So that's making a building a supply point. Alternatively, you might be looking to build a completely new building as an energy center, and therefore that's why you can kind of input a new supply point. So there's some default parameters in here already, but I'm just going to update these. So realistically, you'd probably have some data on what the maximum capacity of that supply point could be. Here, I'm just assuming 5 megawatts. I'm going to put in some cost parameters that kind of reflect large-scale gas CHP in the UK. So those are the parameters I just put in, and you're defining kind of your fixed costs, your capacity costs, your annual cost of supply costs. So that's both your capital costs as a proportion of the size of the installation and kind of your longer term maintenance and operating costs, as well as your cost of fuel. You can also put in emissions factors. So here we've already got in kind of the UK default emission factor for natural gas. As I say, I'm assuming kind of a gas CHP plant, but you can put in what's appropriate, and THERMOS also gives you a kind of an assessment of those values. Now I've defined, you can see this building goes orange, so that shows it's a supply point. And now I've kind of defined everything. I can simply click Optimize Network. And because this is a very small one, it'll run quite quickly. As Martin said, the kind of larger and more complex your problem, the longer it's going to take to run. And then I can go to this solution tab. And what you can see is, first of all, everything's changed color. It was blue to show optional. When you look at the solution, these are now all orange or have this orange border. And what that means is they're in the solution, which means that THERMOS has selected to connect them to the network. You can also see the different paths have changed color to this orange, again, showing they're in network. And you can also see they've changed thickness. So that's a visual representation of the internal pipe diameters. And then when you click on individual buildings, you can see, for example, the revenue they're providing. On pipes, you can look at their diameters. And for this supply point, you can now see how much of that capacity that I made available is used. So here it's used 1.08 megawatts of that 5 megawatts. You also get kind of an overview of financial parameters. So you can go to this solution summary tab, and this gives you brief overview of the different costs. So like the pipe work costs, the heat supply costs. This whole system cost is a little bit false. This NPV here, as you can see when you mouse over, doesn't include the network revenues. So this kind of gives a negative value. But if you go back to kind of your project overview, you can see that the actual solution there value is 2.43 million. So that's the actual net present value to the operator, including those revenues. So what you might want to do now, you've seen this network works. This is an option. And you know it's profitable to the network operator. What you could then go on to do, and what THERMOS makes very easy, is you could go, well, I know I've got about 4 megawatts of extra capacity left on that supply point. Why don't I see what happens if I connect all these buildings as well? So you can easily go in, select these buildings. I'm doing a bit of a rush job here. You wouldn't need to, and those roads, and you could rerun the scenario, and then you can compare the results. So that's kind of the real beauty of THERMOS, is you can very, very quickly assess options, change things, see what you've got left, build out the network more, take off things you think might not work, and so on and so forth. So that's a very kind of rush job of it. You can then later go in and look at, for example, the supply optimizer, but that requires setting up lots of different options. So I haven't kind of gone through that here. I think that's a good summary of how the network optimizer works and kind of demonstrates just how easy it is to use THERMOS and what exactly it can do. And as Martin says, I think a lot of it comes down to kind of the data you put in. The better your data you put in, the more useful you'll find it as a tool. But it can still be useful to you with very, very little data. Thank you for listening to me. I'll hand back to you, and unless there's any, I think we've got a question and answer session at the end, but if there's any kind of brief questions on how THERMOS works, I can take them now quickly.
Yeah, thank you, Luis. Thank you very much. As he said, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat or any quick questions now. But I'm sure as people explore the tool, they would have some questions. I don't know if the participants today are already familiar with the tool. You can also let us know. It would be good to know. But I think the best way to learn more about this tool and other processes of using digital tools to analyze district heating networks is actually hearing from some examples. And we actually have 2 case study cities invited today. And first of all, I will give the floor to Richard Büchele, who is a project manager and a researcher at the Energy Institute of Vorarlberg in Austria. His work focuses on integrated strategic regional energy planning and analysis. He will describe the analysis they carried out for the feasibility study of a district heating network in the town of Bludenz in Austria. And they also use the THERMOS tool, if I'm correct. So, Richard, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Can you see the presentation? Does everything work fine?
Yes, all good.
Okay, perfect. So thanks for the introduction. Again, my name is Richard Büchele. I'm working at the Energieinstitut Vorarlberg, which is a regional energy authority. And I'm responsible for strategic energy planning here in this institution. The study, the analysis I'm going to present today was part of a project, or it was another project, and I did some analysis using THERMOS for this project. And the topic is that, the topic of a presentation is the analysis of economic and ecological feasibility of district heating in a deeply renovated housing estate using THERMOS. What this all means, I'm going to explain within the next 10 minutes. Short agenda, what I'm going to present in the next around 10 minutes. So short introduction to the case study. What was the aim of the study? So what results did we want to analyze? The method behind it, scenario and input data, how did we do it? Then some results and findings. So first, short introduction. We analyzed the housing estate, which is called Südtiroler Siedlung, which is a part of the city of Bludenz. This is the housing estate. You can see it here on the picture. It contains around 80 buildings, so it's mainly small to medium multifamily houses. Altogether, almost 400 flats. They were built between 1943 and 1962, so quite old. Most of the buildings are energetically in their original condition, so no insulation. The windows, they were changed somewhere in the 80s, so the windows are not original, but the rest of the buildings is quite in, let's say, poor condition. Altogether, this housing estate has around 24,000 square meters of living space, and the total area of the land is around 63,000 square meters. It's, let's say, a social housing estate, so there are low rents, low income. This is also why there never was enough money to make some restoration of the buildings. The buildings, they are mostly heated with individual stoves, so there is no central heat distribution system in the buildings. These are mainly biomass, so you can see here they even put the biomass in front of the buildings. Some of them have individual oil stoves or a lot of also electricity, and just a few buildings at one of the corners of this housing estate have a gas connection. Hot water is provided via electric boiler, of course, because there is no central heat distribution system within the building. So this is done by electric boilers. So what was the aim of the study? We wanted to analyze if this housing estate is suitable, and suitable means economic, and that it has economic or ecological advantages for supply via a heating network in comparison to decentral heat pumps, which would be the other option after extensive renovation options have been carried out. So we want to renovate the whole area and then see if it's still suitable for a heating network or what are the advantages or disadvantages. The method we used is, in the first step, we analyzed in detail 2 buildings, which part of the project is to refurbish these 2 buildings, and they were analyzed really in detail. What's the current state? How could they be refurbished? We calculated different refurbishment options with the passive house planning package, PHPP, which is a good tool to do that. We also did some simulations using IDA-ICE for the load profile. So we have an annual load profile, hourly values would be the heating load of each of these 2 buildings. Then I mapped the information we had for the 2 buildings. So these were 2 demonstration buildings, and then I mapped them to the remaining buildings. And I used QGIS, so quantum GIS, for this to attribute all the other buildings according to their information. And then in the final step, or in the last most important step, we then used this data of the buildings and integrated this into the THERMOS tool and did there the calculation of the optimal network design and also the supply optimization. So as Martin said before, we did not use the first module of THERMOS, so the demand estimation we did with a, let's say, more powerful tool, because we have all the individual data of 2 of the buildings, and we could perfectly map them to all the other buildings in this housing estate. But we then used the network optimization tool and also the supply optimization tool. What were some scenario parameters we used? So in first place, we differentiated 3 different areas within the housing estate. So we said this is the most historically valuable part. So it's the oldest and, let's say, the most beautiful part of this housing estate. There in the middle, this is partly valuable, and then here on the top of this housing estate, this is not, let's say, not historically valuable. And then we said, according to the 3 areas, we can have different refurbishment depth. So here, of course, in the let's say not worthable buildings, they can be teared down and newly built, where we can then have the highest quality, of course. Here in the middle, they are partly valuable. There it's possible to make deep renovation, but they should not be teared down, but still, remained. So this is where we can reach this quality. And then in the historically most valuable part, there we cannot refurbish very deeply, because the building should stay more or less as they are, but still there are we can make quite some refurbishments. And this is then the information or the energy data we used for the building to attribute them the heat demand. We also had 2 different densification scenarios. So we said in this historical valuable part, there will be no densification. In the middle, we can build additional living space in the attic. So there's no living space in the attic right now, but there could be additional flats. And in the new buildings, we have 2 scenarios, also adding around 2% of 10% of additional floor space, or high densification, tearing down everything and rebuild it more densely, and then have 50% more. And these are like the bandwidth of the heat demand we could expect in the future. And when we analyze this for the whole area, then we would have in the two most extreme scenarios. So as we would have 4 scenarios, but these are the 2 most extreme ones. We would have between 27 and almost 30,000 square meters of living floor. The heat demand would vary between 1.8 and 2.4, more or less, gigawatt hours per year, and the heat load between 7 and 900 kilowatts. And this was then the information we put into the buildings, into the THERMOS tool, and did all this analysis. I don't want to go too deep into detail into all these tables. Just this was more or less the information we put into THERMOS. These are all the parameters you can choose there, you can switch there. This is, let's say the reference scenario we analyzed, the supplied energy from the buildings, the accounting period, we use discount values, and all these lifetimes. Let's say the pipe temperature is 70-40 degrees, so in and return flow. And then for the network cost, so also we used not the standard data, but we used costs per dimension and surface, so 2 different surfaces, and we took it from the Handbook of Planning of District Heating Networks, which is published by a Swiss company. And this is data which fits pretty good to what we see in costs here in our region. And then we said, the main pipes, they will be under the street. So also we took the roads from OpenStreetMap. This is hard ground, so they are more expensive because they have to be rebuilt. Asphalt have to be put on top. And then the smaller the house connections, we said they can be put into the field. So soft ground, this would be cheaper. And this is then the network we received. We said we have to connect all buildings because the idea is to supply the whole housing estate, and what would it cost, or what would it be feasible to supply the whole area. And this, the second part down here, is then we also used the supply model. So we used cost and technology data from the Danish technology catalog, and then we performed invest and dispatch optimization. We analyzed 3 different sources, so heat-only boiler, CHP, and air source heat pump, and additional storage. And then we optimized the combination of these technologies under different price assumptions, different scenarios. And we put fixtures heat supply location here in the middle. So this is not necessarily that it will be there, the heat supply location, but we put it there to see what would be like the reference scenario. As we had pretty accurate data on the load profiles, we did not use just the standard ones, but we used 2 type days per month. So from January to December, always a weekday, a weekend day, and also an additional peak day of the year, of course. And this is all, this is all the detailed data we used for lifetime efficiencies, investment costs. This is all the data you can put into this supply model of THERMOS. And then what were the results? Also, again, I don't want to bother you too much with all the details of all the scenarios. The idea is just to see. As said before, it's possible to analyze quite a couple of scenarios and then have these different results and compare them. What does the one result, what does the other mean? This is the result of the supply optimization. You can see at which time which unit provides how much energy, and then we also we analyzed what would it cost, or at which price the CHP is the better option than the heat pump, and then we made some analysis to see what would be a good supply combination for this area. What is like the overall finding we got from this analysis? So we saw that the supply via district heating seems feasible despite high energetic quality of building. So that was, which was our question. So if we really deeply renovate this area in different depth, would it still be feasible? And the answer is yes, it is. So especially these level-less distribution costs, they seem to be quite good, or in the range which is normal. So 3.5 to 4.7 cent per kilowatt hour is just the distribution. And then the supply model, from the supply model, we got the generation cost. So what would the heat generation cost? And this, of course, depends a lot on the price assumptions. And yeah, we had quite unsecure, volatile prices in the last year. So this is, of course, there is a higher uncertainty. We did not include investment subsidies so far, which indeed do exist. So in reality, these costs would be lower because investment is subsidized. So the most important thing we got out of this analysis is that the costs are in the similar range than individual heat pumps. So we cannot say that it's way cheaper to have district heating, but also it's not cheaper to have individual heat pumps. So right now it looks like that other non-monetary aspects may be decisive. So of course, district heating system has other advantages. So we do not need, like for each building, an individual heat pump. So we do not have 80 units out there. We do have less costs of maintenance, because we don't have to maintain 80 heat pumps, just one unit. And also there is not a lot of space in the building's cellar. So with this heat exchanger, which we use in district heating system, we need way less space, of course, than these individual heat pumps would need. And yeah, this is more or less everything I have to say so far to my to our analysis, and I'm happy, of course, to answer your question.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you very much for showing your case study. It's very interesting how you used all these different tools, including THERMOS, to do a very deep analysis of the district heating network. And we actually have another case study to showcase today. Will be presented by Luis Miguel Blanes, who is a researcher of the IRUSE group within the University of Galway. And his research focuses on the development of tools and methods for energy management based on building performance simulation. So he will also explain the use of the digital tools for the analysis of a district heating network in the campus of the University of Galway, right? So Luis Miguel, the floor is yours. And
yeah, thank you very much. Nice to meet you all. I'm gonna share screen here if you can see everything.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's start. This is a case study that we have developed in the last months for the University of Galway. The University of Galway, as you may know or not know, have a sustainability commitment due to the public body status. We will talk about this. So in the picture, as you can see, there is already a connection, a branch connection that we did as part of the GeoFit project, which is an EU project funded by the Horizon 2020 program on ground source heat pump. And what we are basically trying to do is to put into operation an existing district heating pipeline that was installed some sort of 12 or 13 years ago already, with the idea to supply hot water to a leisure complex, like a swimming pool and gym complex for the university, from a centralized energy center. So it will be all. So this was a branch connection of the ground source heat pump to that district heating network, what we are doing now is to put more buildings into the existing pipeline. You will understand better. I'm trying to pass here, and I can't. Let me see. I'll do this. Okay. So we will strive forward with the Irish situation. Then we will talk about the pilots and what will be the next steps. Okay. So this is just a summary of the district heating and cooling Ireland policy. So in the three first items are government policy instruments. So there is a national heat study, which is kind of an overview of the objectives for the 2050 scenario for the whole country. And then there is a seminal document. It's called District Heating and Cooling Solutions, Spatial Analysis and Infrastructure Cost and Potential in Ireland. So from this third document, we had what I would call the government-backed or the government explore options for district heating. In the same way, we were looking at the Austrian case study with different sources of heat. So we took that into consideration, and the objective is to see what are the different sources of heating for a particular district heating layout. Okay. Then there is already an association, District Energy.ie, and they kind of lobby or try to gather all the stakeholders around district heating networks in the island of Ireland, and try to make the case for streamlining and improve the instruments to develop district heating case studies in the country. So as I said, these are from the district heating and cooling spatial analysis of infrastructure. So currently there's 7 options considered. We are willing to explore option 2 to option 6, plus an additional option, which is a water source heat pump. Currently in Ireland, the water sources, as per environmental considerations, are by default non-exploitable. So we will anyway consider that as the proximity to the Corrib River in the campus make it very easy to consider. Okay. Let's go to the next slide. I'm gonna just get rid of this. Okay, so what are the objectives of the University of Galway district heating pilot and the THERMOS study? So we will develop the THERMOS case study, compare the THERMOS demand estimation with other estimation methods. This is one of the first problems when you get to use the tool. And we'll talk about this later. Run the network problem, size the supply, which is, in my opinion, very interesting. So the THERMOS is very interesting to size the supply. So you just consider a heat source, you just probably oversized, or you can consider 2 heat sources or 3, if you consider 3, or limit to 2, and then loop over a number of options, and it will size the network. So you can have an overview of, I think, a very good kind of first shot at sizing an optimum supply. So you can start considering different types of heating production. Okay. Developing the supply problem. We wanted to see what's the impact of temperature supply. So from a gas-based system with a 90 to 70 degree delta T, or to a lower temperature system, 60 to 40 degrees delta T. So far, we haven't found that this impacts too much into the overall economics, the present value, etc. But I mean, we keep digging into the tool and see if we if we take this analysis further and see if basically we are doing something wrong or considering something that is not really relevant, and if this is the case, so then the in economic terms the difference comparisons, so the comparison of feasibility impact of the temperatures maybe is not really relevant. So that's a good outcome also of the tool. Okay, we also have an interest on including this kind of tools as a teaching instrument for Master of Energy modules or Master of on Civil Engineering, and we actually have participation of master students on using the THERMOS tool. And the main and the real reason to use this tool is to support something called EXCEED grant application. EXCEED is a certified grant scheme that runs Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland, and it's very let's say just by looking at the EXCEED application. Let me see. You pop up here. It's already overwhelming because it's very like the degree of control and the degree of documentation and studies and stages that you have to submit to get the grant approved. It's really very demanding. So it's all based on measurement and verification and energy management standards. So this is these EXCEED applications. You have more information in the links, but basically we are looking for funding of the project, and I will explain what the project is about. So this is a picture of the central campus of the University of Galway. This small building here is the energy center. So that was the original intention of the district heating, and this white line is already a district heating pipeline that is already tested and installed a number of years ago. We have completed that with a geothermal heat pump with 18 boreholes, 100 kilowatt heat pump system, and we have made a connection with this new pipeline, which was the one that I show in the picture in the slide. So what's the project about is to include a number of buildings. So 1, 2, 3, and 4 academic buildings. These are academic buildings. This is already connected to the energy center as default, as this was part of the same project. This is School of Engineering, where I'm sitting now currently. And then there are 2 additional buildings that the grant application asked us to include. One is a public duty one. So this is a small one-story GP surgery, and it's kind of a small doctors, consultants, mini hospital here, run by the health system executive, the HSE, and then a residential use. So the residential use is a newly 400 units accommodation. It's called Goldcrest Village University Campus. So these are 4 blocks of 4 stories with it's kind of a hotel type accommodation. So in this continuous white, what you will see is the new branches, new connection branches that we are looking for, and this is the layout. So this is the a bit more in depth what we did with GeoFit project, which is the layout of the new pipeline that you saw in the pictures to connect with the existing one, which is shown here in yellow. So this is already done, and in operation we are running it. I'm actually sitting in this lab here, and we are within the first year of operational contractual operation after the handover. So we are running and optimizing the operation of the geothermal heat pump. And this is the THERMOS workflow that we did. This is more or less what's has been explained before by the other experts. We have fairly done all the steps here. I'd say the key here on this case study, it's really to look at the costs and at the data on demand, which was also very interesting. And I think that the key here to understand how the THERMOS works is to have a look at this forbidden, mandatory, and optional. So there, when you use the tool and the map tools and the network optimization, I think it's the most powerful step, as you may go along a feasibility study, especially if you work with a local authority, they probably don't know too much what to do and how long and how fast or how extensive a district heating network could be. And this allows you to plan a number of scenarios in an incredibly fast manner. So exactly the network calculation, as I was said before, is extremely fast. So and by using bulk selection and looping into different scenarios where you try to get the software to decide, maybe according to the size of the supply, or you put constraints on different parts of the city or of the building, or different types of supply, or different combinations of supplies in different parts of sectors of the city. By combining forbidden, mandatory, and optional, I think it's very powerful to understand what could be done in an area in a very quick way, and what the layout, and physically showing local authorities what the layout would be. And I think it's very powerful, so they can even foresee what would be the problems, the permits, and the existing infrastructure that they have to look at when you just show them the different alternatives. I think that's very interesting because it's very visual, and it's a very interesting feature of the tool. So what we have here is the whole campus. I won't explain this because this is just it's just features of the program. What we see is that yes, the OpenStreetMap tools works very well. So it inherits all the paths, and the layout of the buildings. I try to trick OpenStreetMaps, but as I wasn't really an expert on that environment, and the trick was just basically to include a number of buildings that I know and we know, like they will be potentially be built in the coming years. So we have a new learning commons coming here. It's kind of the new library for the building. We have a water sports centers coming here. We have a new security office around here. So I did kind of a perimeter and update on OpenStreetMaps. I uploaded it, and it was deleted in 1 week by someone moderator. So this is like basically like Wikipedia. So anyone can update, delete, or maybe there are some sort of moderators that have more privilege than you, and they can ban anything that seems not to be real. That was basically the option, the reason to delete. So preliminary data on demand estimation. So that was a bit of a nightmare, to be honest with you. As much as is advisable is to use, in my opinion, meter data. That's the most realistic thing to do. We did that for the geothermal project, and it saved us a lot of headaches. Install heat meters or have meter data or gas meters and submeter as much as possible. If possible, even a small investment saves you a lot of uncertainty. And uncertainty, it's a driving force when you talk about investments. So we currently have no data available on gas meters. We will have it in soon, but what we did was to use the archetypes, which are kind of bulk statistical data on the building stock at a country level. Some of them they work, some of them don't. Data on building energy rating. So we have here the non-electrical consumption, and we know the building, we know it's gas for heating. And in general, what we found is that, and then we have estimations with the archetype. So these estimations are not really very accurate. And what we found is that in general, we probably would consider the a bit more energy consumption what THERMOS does. Okay. So we know it depends on the stories, and it depends on the heights if they are there on OpenStreetMaps or not. And that also needs consideration. I can, if it's a very, very big area, I would say take it very carefully, because maybe the stories are not really there in OpenStreetMaps, and you just have to be careful in considering what would you consider as a real or energy demand figure. For instance, we also have overestimated energy demand. So this is from building energy rating. And these two buildings is just simply, they are not really, they're underused. So this is, as this is a real consumption, then the question is, would you oversize the network or these buildings as full occupancy or full usage, or will you keep them as they use nowadays, so as a kind of a reduced consumption schedule or something? So also consideration is given to sometimes to the degree days, so this has to be, I think, calculated. It's good for a first shot, but when you are looking into more detail, you just have to put degree days and temperatures of the ground also that are realistic. And these are the first results so far. We have that developed. Let me go back again. Developed, and the layout looks fine. Like there's some kind of silly things that you just have to tidy and delete, and some of the paths that they were kind of non-existent. So we have that connection here. So it's a matter of refining the paths and deleting what doesn't make sense. And we have already an initial supply sizing, which looks okay for internally here. We have also discussion on civil cost and connection cost of the substations. There is a huge difference, and this is kind of a battlefield for let's say engineers, developers, etc., to knowing really what's the cost of construction here in Ireland. And there's a tendency to underestimate costs. But in the national cost study, for instance, there are considerations on trench costs, piping costs, etc., that are far away from what we have maybe in the market. So we need to understand why is that. And it is already a interesting tool in the sense that it takes into consideration the demand coincidence and the peaks, etc. So these are difficult things to explain, because what
Sorry,
we have
Luis
seen.
Miguel,
Yeah.
yes. 1 second, as it's 12, if you can finish in the next minute or so.
Yeah, I will. So what we see normally on feasibility studies is that normally engineers, and when talking about heat pumps, they tend to oversize the systems, and it's a matter of feasibility. It's a matter of having a system that is not operationally optimized, but that can provide a reliable source of heat. So the tendency is to estimate and overestimate also the supply peak power. Okay. So of course we don't consider revenues, and the total results. We have done some comparison between gas boilers, water source heat pumps, and actually the figures of whole system net present value. They look really in consonance with other pre-feasibility studies that were developed for the EXCEED application. So we are very happy to continue exploring the tool and refining, of course, the inputs, specifically with the cost data. So there are a number of reflections there that I think I have already mentioned. The economics of heat generation is really uncertain, and the construction cost is really a key point here, especially in UK and in Ireland, where there tends to be over cost for capital projects in big projects. We know it very well with the high speed and the metro link here in Dublin. So the next steps will be to consider construction costs in depth, the hydronic design operation in depth. So we have, and then the counterfactual for the EXCEED application, which is the cost of the things that we need to do if we weren't doing district heating, because it's considered in the application as they grant the excess of the cost of the interventions that you have already to do due to renovation or adaptation to building regulations, etc. So we need to do that counterfactual, and also to use, as per the application conditions, 20 years financing horizon instead of the default, which is in the system, I think is 40 years. So overall, it's very positive tool, and it's a very powerful tool to, I think, specifically for larger areas, okay, of the city, and areas that are kind of homogeneous on size and types of buildings, maybe 2 or 3 types of buildings. If there's a lot of types and a lot of different building schedules and systems, it becomes more kind of difficult to manage time-wise. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you very much.
Thank you, Luis. Thank you very much for showing this other example of using the THERMOS tool for the assessment of a district heating network. And if I can have everyone's attention for just 1 last minute, I will show you our next webinar to come as part of this onHeat training program. We will have the last webinar of this program coming on 25th April with under the title, A Look at the Future of Heating and Cooling in Europe. So we want this to be a closing webinar of this training to see how cities will develop and how they are working on decarbonizing the sector. Also, as I mentioned in the previous webinar, there's a possibility to get certified with THERMOS if you attended this webinar, and then you would have to do an extra exercise at home. I will send a follow-up email with all of this information and today's recording, so I will explain there how you can get this certification. Go check out our Acting Heat support facility in our website.
Yulen, you've gone on mute.
Oh, sorry. Again. Also, I just wanted to mention lastly that if you are an ICLEI member, you can attend our next webinar focusing on cool cities, exploring district cooling potential for cities. So you can check that in the ICLEI website also. And that's all. Thank you very much to everyone, to our speakers and the participants, and have an amazing afternoon to everyone. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Yulen, just before we finish, there were a couple of questions in the chat. I don't know whether it's possible for the speakers to perhaps share their emails in the chat so that there can be bilateral conversations following the call.
Okay, yeah, we will. Okay, we will save the questions also, and we can follow up by email with all of you. No problem.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Should leave.